So we just hit play. Please stand by. Cool. Give it a moment to start up. I want proof that it's working.
You want to prove it's working? There is a bit of a lag.
It says one viewer, and I know that's me.
It is a bit of a lag.
Yeah. I think it's like 10 or 15 seconds, actually.
Yeah.
The whole YouTube rendering thing is amazing.
We can edit this out later.
I know, but I did this video yesterday on Windows 10, like last night, like 1 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. And they upload it, and it comes up first at like 120p, and then it eventually works its way up to 1080p.
Cool.
It's like right now. Okay, here we go. Oh, it worked. Okay, cool. It's amazing. Good job.
First time.
Good job. All right. Hey, everybody. It's the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up, and I'm here. Today we just have Damien. John is not around. Hello, Damien.
Hi.
Hi. So if we did this right, you are looking at this site on live.asp.net, your one-stop shopping center for all things ASP.NET Community Stand-Up. I think it is lovely. And you wrote this, Damien, in a couple of days, did you not?
Yeah, so we came up with this idea after last week's show. Andrew Nurse and I were chatting because we sit next to each other. And I was lamenting the fact that we don't get many live viewers. And Fowler was on IM with me and said, oh, has the show been on yet? And I'm like, yeah, the show was on, we're done. And he's like, I didn't see the tweet. And therein, like, just lied the problem is that the only way to catch us live was to see the tweet go through the fire hose of Twitter, because as much as we try and start on time every week, it's technology, and there's always something that, like today, I had to wait 5 minutes on my machine to do something, and that's why we weren't bang on 10 a.m. So we thought, why wouldn't you just create a site where this might make the experience a little easier? So I think I started on Thursday, and then I spent most of Friday working on it. I did a bit of work on Saturday on it, and then obviously yesterday. And what you see is what we have now at live.asp.net. It's a very simple sort of single page site, and then it has an admin screen that people can't see where we type in the URL and the date of the next show and all that stuff. And it's written in ASP.NET 5, Beta 5, hosted up on Azure Web Apps. So how did you do the authentication? So it uses, so as I said, there's an admin screen. So we authenticate using Azure AD. So you, John, and I can sign in using our Microsoft CorpNet credentials, and then we're able to manipulate what shows on the front page. And that's all done using Azure AD.
So to be clear, there's no back-end store for that, because Microsoft's domain has that synchronization with the Azure Active Directory. It's as if it's an intranet site. It's like it's a business site for Microsoft. And we authenticate with our smart cards like business users, and it just works. So when you log in, it has Damien@Microsoft.com at the bottom.
Yeah, it literally has like dedward@Microsoft.com is my username, which is my O365 alias, which is linked to our Active Directory internally. And this is what anyone who's running Active Directory in their enterprise can do now with Azure AD, which is kind of cool. Right. It's the first time I'd ever used it.
It's pretty cool. Like in the old days, you would have, an ASP.NET membership or something behind it. We had to make another account, and it would be a whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so I even just used, I went File New, ASP.NET 5 website. I ticked, was it Organizational Authorization, I think, in the button. And I clicked that, and that took me through like a bouncing ball wizard, and I signed in, and I gave it my domain, and it connected to Azure, like during File New, created the application, emitted the code into my app, created the secret in my user secret store, did all that type of stuff so that it would, just work. And it did. Like I said, I'd never done it before. I had to futz about a bit in the portal afterwards to create a copy of the app for the staging environment and for the production environment, because you need different, client ID keys, because I don't want to share the secrets between the different environments, all that type of stuff. But once I figured all that out, it basically just worked. And I also had a little bit of trouble with cookies because it's the bane of my existence. Is I have my personal Microsoft account, like Damien@DamienEdwards.com, and then I have my CorpNet account, and I tend not to mix those in the same browser, because I find if I have like two cookies from different things, sites can get a bit confused about which AD am I trying to sign in with. So once I figured that out, everything's kind of works quite well now.
Yeah, I try to put. I wrote a little blog post. I'm trying to get it built into the product for the next update. The whole incognito mode as a browser. I want incognito and in private to appear as a separate browser.
Oh, in Visual Studio, you mean?
So in Visual Studio, you add a new browser, you add Chrome or whatever, IE, and then you go dash incognito, and then you make it a individual browser, so that every time you hit Control F5, it's as if your cookies are cleared.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
So you call the can you maybe if you don't mind showing the site? It's kind of weird.
Let me show the actual. Let me share my screen.
The site while watching the site.
I'm not playing the video, so people won't be. So that won't.
It'd be awesome though if you did, because
behind
the universe. We should try that at least. Share your screen.
I'm not sure my machine would like me doing so much at once. Like, it's not a bad little ultrabook, but I'm not sure I can handle me broadcasting Hangouts while showing. But we'll try it. Let me. How do I? That screen. I want to show that screen.
Yeah.
I just need to pick of the many different options. All right. So it says I'm sharing. You tell me it says I am currently screen sharing. So here's the site.
You gotta at least hit play once. Just do
okay,
that.
Let me hit play.
I mean, come on.
I should probably mute. There we go, and it's muted.
It's us watching ourselves. Okay, now you can talk. Okay.
All right.
So you got on air, and then you scroll down a little bit, and you've got a nice grid.
Yep.
Looks like it was designed by a professional designer.
Yeah, the ones that work at Bootstrap.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I literally just took the Bootstrap default stuff that goes into our templates. I opened Photoshop for the first time in 4 years, and I created this very lame background image up here. I'm going to make that a little more diverse. So rather than using the same 3 images, I'm going to try and make a bigger collage, and I'll put some screenshots, like code and stuff in there as well. Right. So expect that background image to change a bit. I just whacked that up really quick. And then I tweaked the CSS so it didn't just look like the standard Bootstrap theme. I changed the font to be the same as the ASP.NET website's font. I got rid of all the rounded corners because we don't have rounded corners generally in our properties. So this is a standard Bootstrap thumbnail, but as I said, I've removed all the rounded corners. Then what else? So same for the button. I removed the rounded corners there. I added the footer to match what we have on the main website. And you can see I'm signed in, so I get these little sign-in stuff down here that people visiting the site won't be getting. And if I flip over to the admin screen, you can see here, we can put in an admin message, and I can put in the embed streaming URL, and I can put in the next show date and time. And I can also clear the YouTube cache. So that list of previous shows is coming straight from YouTube. So we make a server call from the ASP.NET app on the server to YouTube API using a secret key, and we download basically all the shows from the playlist that you maintain. And then I cache that really aggressively so that I only make that call once a day on the web server, because it doesn't change much. And then we can come in here and hit clear YouTube cache, and then the next time the site is visited, we'll make that call again. And that's it. Like, that is really the entire site. It's 2 pages.
And if it's just 2 pages, where was the time spent? So
most of it's funny you ask. A little bit of time spent learning the .NET YouTube API. So if I go and look at that code, I'll just flip over to Visual.
Just a get, right?
It's pretty much a get, but I ended up using their NuGet package rather than just trying to do it manually. So if I look at that service, the YouTube shows service.
So you made your own, you just used the get, or did you use their API?
I used their .NET API. They have a NuGet package.
So you did bring their NuGet in.
I did. I brought their NuGet in because this is running on .NET 4.5.1. I'm not running on .NET Core, although I think their package would work on .NET Core because it supports a very liberal portable profile. So here's my get shows list. So I create a new YouTube service. I initialize it with this. It's kind of it's an odd API. You have to pass in an instance of this base client service initializer into the YouTube service client class, and then you make basically a bunch of calls. You set some properties, like I want to get a snippet. That creates you a list request, which you set more properties on. Then you call execute async on that, which makes the actual call, and then I loop through and project those results into my view model, essentially my show list model, with a little bit of transformation as necessary. Like I munge the video URL a bit. I parse out the
Right.
show date from the from something published at Raw, and I parse out the title. I get useful bits from title. I strip out the date from the title and the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up and stuff like that.
You came up with a formal way to extremely formal to embed stuff in the title and pull stuff out of that.
Yeah, you can see it here. Basically, I look for 2 hyphens, and then I take everything after the last one.
Right. And,
yeah,
now there's a YouTube API that you're calling that has an API key. So I had to go in and make an account, get you an API key that you embedded secret config. And you know, when I see stuff like this, like maybe I'm just super old, but I personally would have still rather had it just be like an RSS feed that would have been completely anonymous, and it would have been.
You mean if YouTube had done that? You mean?
What's that? You
mean if YouTube had have just exposed it as an RSS feed?
What I'm saying is, yeah, like in the new world, you had to go and make an app, and there's an app ID, and then we had to make an account for the app, and I had to give you a GUID for the thing, and then you called it, and you get JSON, and da-da-da-da-da. But if it could have just been RSS, and it would have been a meta tag, you could have just done a view source, got the content type for that, or even if it was really RESTful, you make a GET to the YouTube API, the exact same URL that you would get when you ask for a YouTube playlist, and you just say, I accept XML.
Yeah, I was a little surprised that it looks like you have to be authenticated to call the YouTube API, unlike the GitHub API where you can make calls to their REST API and it's just rate limited per hour if you're not authenticated. But YouTube, you have to be authenticated. But yeah, I mean, that's fine. That didn't really irk me that much. I kind of expected I'd have to do that, but I see what you mean. Interestingly,
that's lamenting the complexity of these things. I mean, I see that it's nice because we can revoke that app if we wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. And they now know who's calling it, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, you can do a lot more through that API, obviously, than just list out stuff in a playlist. You can create stuff, obviously, as well, and all that type of stuff. But so interestingly here, obviously, none of the secrets are in our config. This is one of the features of our new config system. The only thing in my config JSON is the stuff that isn't really secret. And then I have a separate user secret store, which is a JSON file in my user profile, and then that's set in environment variables in Azure so that no one ever sees those secrets in source control, which is kind of cool.
When you opened that, I was worried that you were going to give away our secrets, but this is not secret stuff.
Yeah, this is the public playlist ID.
So where are the secrets when you're running locally?
In your user profile.
And you use the user-secrets ASP.NET 5 app.
Yeah. So you use the secret manager command that lets you add user secrets, and then that puts them in the user secret store in your user profile, and then they just appear in config, because if I go to my startup class, we have this, if I'm in development, we add user secrets to the config, and so they just appear as any other config value. And then on the production servers in Azure, they appear because we have add environment variables, and I set all those keys as environment variables through the Azure portal. So there's 2 of them really. There's 2 big secrets. There's the YouTube app ID, and then there's, or key, or whatever it's called, and then there's the one for Azure AD, the client ID, I think it is. So they have to be set on every environment that you run on. And yeah, that was it. So there's no secrets in config, which is kind of nice. What else did I do that was interesting? I created a tag helper just for fun. I created a tag helper that renders partials, because now that I have tag helpers, I don't want to have to use HTML helpers to render a partial. So if we look at my layout page and I scroll up, you'll see here that I have a tag called partial, and I pass in the name of the partial, and that renders that partial. Now, that sounds a little silly, but in my index, I can pass a model to that as well. So if I scroll down here, where I'm showing the previous episodes, here's my YouTube show partial, and I pass in the show as a model. And so that view, that means that I can use partials because they're nice, because I can just create CSHTML files. I don't have to write code, but then I can invoke it using HTML, which I kind of like, but you don't have to do that. I just kind of did that because that was fun. What else is interesting?
So the partial there, that's not purple. That's you.
That's
or
because
that's
no, that's just because something is going wrong with my machine at the moment.
Oh, okay.
Just ignore the fact. That should be purple.
Okay, and that is a Damienism.
Yeah, that's a Damienism. I created that. So you can see up here in my tag helpers folder, I have a partial tag helper.
Let's look at that again.
So that's just, it's not much code. It literally has a property on it, a name and a model, and then I run through and I render out the partial into the tag helper output.
Render the partial.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, so that was kind of fun.
You do anything with grunt or gulp or any Angular or anything custom?
Nothing custom. So the gulp file is the one that comes in the template, which is minifying the CSS and the JavaScript when run in production. So that's, I didn't change this file at all. I didn't do, what else? I didn't add anything from Bower. I removed a bunch of stuff from the homepage that we're not using, so we don't even use jQuery and things like that. So I just removed all the links. I went through and did some optimization.
And your persistence is, how is that being done?
It's totally not persisting at all right now. So at the moment, I'm using EF, but I'm just using the in-memory store. That's my next task, is to grab Rowan Miller and have him teach me how to set this up to use SQL and get that working in Azure and do all that sort of stuff, because frankly, I've never done it. So I'm going to do that next, so that every time I deploy a new version, I don't have to go back to the admin screen to set the next show date again. But because that is EF, like the code is written to use EF, it's just that it's configured with the in-memory store. I don't have to change any of the other code once I do that. I'll just change this line here to say, hey, use SQL instead of using in-memory, and then I'll have to run a migration somewhere to create the schema, and that'll be it. The rest of the app will just keep working the way it does. So that's pretty cool. What else did we do?
Let me ask a couple of like hard questions, if I may. While doing this, is there anything that you bumped into that would be hard for someone who wasn't the owner of the ASP.NET project?
Lots of things.
And what do we do with that information? Like, what's an example, and then how do we make the product better because of that?
So I have to do a write-up. Now that I've got this working, I'm going to send a big email, basically. I'm going to send a big email and include all the owners of the various bits I'm going to be giving feedback on, and see if we can make some suggestions on how to fix it. So the Azure AD stuff, while doing the file new stuff, made it work. It wasn't immediately obvious what I was supposed to do. I mean, that made it work for localhost, right? But that doesn't, once I deployed it to Azure, it stopped working because the URLs were different. And it wasn't really clear what I was supposed to do there. I just assumed, well, I guess I have to go off and create manually 2 other apps in my AD in the Azure portal. Now, remember, I didn't even create the first one because the template did that for me. And so there was a bit of a disconnect there that, yeah, it created enough for me to get it going in localhost, but there was no hint that I had to go and do another one and change a key and do all that other type of stuff to make it work. I just kind of spoke to some people and futzed around until I figured out how to make that work. The redirect, the config for the Azure AD didn't have this property set to true. The default to current URI on redirect. Sorry, I stopped sharing. So,
by the way,
yep.
There's 140 people watching.
Oh my God, it works.
So we doubled it with Bootstrap. That's how the story is being told.
Yeah, absolutely. So the default code spit from the templates for using Azure AD doesn't set the property on the options that will make it redirect back to the original URL if you force authorization. So I would go to the site and say /admin. That would redirect me to, Azure AD to log me in, and then it would take me back to the home page. So it took me a while to figure out why that wasn't working, and it was just a property I had to set in the options. So I'm going to try and get that changed to be true by default. What else was there? I ran into a bunch of annoyances with the CSS editor and the Razor editor. So just like the smart formatting was getting in my way, I would try and put a brace here and it would try and indent a bunch of stuff, and a couple of times it just got really confused and I'd have to undo, and there were certain types of things where it would just really fight me when I was trying to just type some code, and those type of things are really annoying, so we'll definitely try and get that tweaked. I had to use, when I was tweaking the site CSS, I had to use media queries in order to make it resize well, right? So out of the box, like it resizes well, but once you start adding your own content and using more Bootstrap components, you have to think about how it's going to work at the various Bootstrap snap points, because Bootstrap has the snap points that relate to different device sizes, and they have media queries. We don't put those media queries in the site.css by default.
Right.
I think we put it in for one, but we don't put it in for all the snap points. So I had to go and learn that on Bootstrap. I had to like paste those in, and then I found I had to reuse those a lot. So that might be useful if we put those in the site.css by default.
Now on YouTube, I noticed that you've got the thing doing embed and embed responsive. Is that a Bootstrap?
Yeah. So let me screen share again.
That seems new in Bootstrap 3. I remember I had to do embedded YouTube resizing on my blog. I have a custom CSS where I reach into the iframe to make it resize. It was quite challenging.
Yeah, so that was all the things I did. I did update to Bootstrap 3.3, and that required me to change in order to get some of the new classes that I needed. So this embed responsive item is a Bootstrap component. That's quite nice. But in updating to Bootstrap 3.3, these links, this code here in the layout, the fallback test, stopped working because Bootstrap changed the name of this class from hidden to invisible.
Oh, wow.
So hidden in Bootstrap now sets display none, which you can't use on a meta tag. It doesn't work for this test. So I had to change it. And so that took me a little bit to figure out why the fallback was kicking in, and it was trying to download Bootstrap from my app. And then what I also found is that was set to .min.css, but that doesn't exist in the Bootstrap, in the Bower component, so that was failing. And so there was a few little things like that.
Would that be qualified as a bug, or is that just something you had?
That's a bug in the template.
Bug in the template.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just a bug in the template. So I figured that out, and I fixed that here, so I'll have to log that one. This morning I made some changes around the analytics. So I had the analytics loading in the wrong part of the page. I had them at the end because I just always put the JavaScript at the end, but the analytics stuff should really be in the head. But we have two sets of analytics in this site, and one of them has to be in the body, and the other one has to be in the head. So I had to split those into two separate sections this morning. So I did that. What else? And then I spent a lot of time getting that the next show time to show on the home page in the browser local time. So let me bring up the staging.
A little bit of gratuitous fun.
Yeah, let me show you the staging site, because obviously the live show is showing us right now. So if I bring up the staging site, and the site does take a little bit to boot in Azure, I'm noticing. After you do a deployment, it takes about 15 seconds to start. So my guess is because they haven't pre-installed the packages in Azure websites for beta 5 yet, and so it's taking a while to get them. When the site boots. That's my guess, but I'll find out. So note that this doesn't have, I have to go into the admin page, because this doesn't have, because that app rebooted, it fall back to the generic message, not the time-specific message. So if I come back in here and I add back, and I also, interestingly, this will actually fail because at that time is not in the future. So I wrote a custom validation attribute that ensures that this date time is in the future in Pacific time. So that was a little bit of fun. There's a bit of code in there that does that. So I can show that quickly because that was kind of fun. So if I go over to model, I have the date after now attribute. So you give it a time zone ID, and then it checks that the time that you supply as a UTC is actually in the future once you've converted it to the time zone ID that you specify. And then in my admin view model, you can see I've decorated next show date PST with date after now and past in Pacific Standard Time as the time zone ID. So that validates. So if I come back here and I set that to tomorrow, we save that. That will now save, and I go back to the home page and hit F5. So yeah, having this here show up in the time of the person who's currently using the browser, that was, it took about 17 commits to get right. I was trying to be too clever, and I was breaking the cardinal rule of always store dates in UTC and then do all the transformation on the way in and the way out. And I was trying to be a little bit too clever. And so once I reverted to the golden rule, everything started to work properly. And then all this is actually done in JavaScript. So if I go,
actually, like I've still on some older browsers seeing PDT twice, and like not every browser supports the things that we're doing here.
yeah, well, to be clear, I am being a little, I'm trusting the browser to do a thing, and then I'm just assuming that what it's doing is what I expect. Some browsers do something weird, do things a little differently to others when you call to locale date string. So what I'm doing is where is it? So somewhere up here, I call blah, 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 extract time zone.
Yeah.
And I basically assume that the date string passed in contains a parentheses, which will contain the name of the time zone, which is what most browsers do when you call toString on a date, right? They'll actually give you a full long string which includes the time zone name inside parentheses.
Locale specific? Is that a language specific string, or is that a variant thing?
It is a browser specific thing. Every browser does it slightly differently.
I see.
And so, but most browsers,
you're treating it not as an English sentence, you're treating it as a piece of data that you can.
Yep, absolutely. And so, as you found last night on the iPhone, in the previous version of this, I was then appending that to toLocale string, and on the iPhone, toLocale string also includes the time zone, but it's not in parentheses.
Yeah.
So you've got double time zone.
Now, aren't you being a little bit like one of the people online, Matt Johnson, as I recall from Notatime, was like, just use this library.
Yep.
But it was a 100K library, and like I'm not saying you shouldn't have done it this way or that way, but you kind of made a conscious decision to have no dependencies.
I made a conscious decision that I was not going to bring in any dependencies for a number of reasons. One of them, the size you just mentioned. Two, I'm not able to load it from another CDN because this is a Microsoft website. We're forbidden from loading external resources from non-Microsoft domains, which means I would have to have hosted that on my own CDN, which was just too much trouble. And
so you're basically saying rather than do the paperwork for open source, you just wrote a little bit.
Yep. I just wrote a tiny little bit of JavaScript that works in most places, and I don't have to worry about downloading an extra library with however many kilobytes and all the other stuff.
Seems very reasonable.
Yeah, and it seems that for most people it's working okay. Firefox is doing something a little strange because it puts different things inside the parentheses apparently, so it does something a little odd on Windows. But for most people, this is working perfectly fine.
I love it. I think it's great.
I'm glad you like it.
I think it's totally pro.
So maybe we should answer some questions. People are asking questions up here now that we have lots of people.
Let's do that. Will the live.asp.NET project be put on GitHub?
I don't know yet. I would like to. I will certainly look into it. It's currently a private repo under the ASP.NET org on GitHub. I will talk to my boss.
I think actually there's a rule. You can check with Bill Staples, but there's a rule about samples and the number of lines of code. If it's under a certain number of lines of code, you can put it up without a review.
Yeah, that's true, but technically this isn't a sample, it's a live site. So
okay, valid point. Okay. No, that's about, I'm just looking for loopholes,
You're looking for loopholes, yeah. No. Yeah, there are some things we take very seriously, and I tend to try and ensure that I do this type of stuff above board. So I will definitely ask.
That's why you're more successful than I am.
I don't know what measure you're using there.
Well, you work at Microsoft, and I have an arcade. So
you have a Millennium Falcon.
Oh, that's touche. Nick wants to know, how do you call the secrets? Like, how do you get a hold of those secrets?
So that was the code in my startup.cs. So if I share my screen,
so you grab it on startup, and they don't change.
Yeah, so as part of the new config system, configuration is done during application boot up, like in your startup constructor right here. Right. And I create a configuration builder. I pass in a base path. I then add sources. So I add my config JSON. I add an environment specific one if I have one. I don't have one. And then I say, if I'm in development, call this add user secrets extension method. And that reads from the secret store and pushes them into the configuration object. And then I add environment variables, so they will overwrite anything that's currently in the store, and then you assign configuration after calling build. That's it.
That's cool. I love the whole config.environment.json thing. Like, that's subtle, but something that we should have done years ago.
Yeah, like this was actually good for me to experience because we designed the system to work well, specifically for cloud-based deployments. And it did. Like, it actually just worked the way we kind of intended. So that was nice.
Yeah, totally.
Someone asking about roadmap for EF.
Yes.
Josh.
We have a very nice roadmap for ASP.NET.
Yes, I believe the EF team is putting together a similar document if they have not already. I will endeavor to get back to you on that, and if they do, I'll link to it from the other roadmap. Okay, so people can see that.
All right, and I think that James is answering Nick's question there.
Okay.
Loading in through add secrets. James is getting an error after updating a project to DNX 4.6 and bumping package versions. He still gets the current runtime target framework is not compatible.
Where else to look beyond project JSON and global JSON? I'm assuming that error, I'm not quite sure where that error is coming from, if that's coming from VS or it's coming from, well, if he's in VS, he has to also update the VS tooling. And I have a link for that. We have tooling that goes out with the release today, not just beta 6. So let me see if I can find that page, and I can, there it is. There we go. Let me share my screen again. So here we go on the download center. This is the link to Microsoft ASP.NET and Web Tools 2015 Beta 6 for Visual Studio 2015. This includes a new installer for DNVM, the MSI, because Visual Studio actually talks to DNVM, and also for the tooling. And so if you haven't installed that, you will probably get issues in Visual Studio. You have to install the tooling as well as Beta 6 for things to work properly. If you still get an issue, then by all means, reach out to us again and we'll try and figure out what's going on. There is a blog post going live, I think, today as well that details the Beta 6 release.
Okay, so I have which version if I just install 2015 release?
Beta 5.
Okay, so if I upgrade to Beta 6, if I'm following along, basically, I add this.
Yes, you'll add this. And there's a whole bunch of install instructions down here on how to do it properly, safely. If you are using an internationalized version of Visual Studio, you have a language pack, then there's an extra step that you have to follow in order to ensure that you get the appropriate language pack for the new bits. Because there's a whole bunch of languages in here. As you can see, there's a lot of files.
Right.
But essentially, you install two things. You install the correct bitness of the .NET Version Manager, and you install Web Tools extensions, or if you're using the Express SKU, you use this one, VWD, because that's the Visual Web Developer Express version of the tooling.
One of the other things that's worth pointing out that we did a little bit of work on recently, and you can maybe confirm it for me there, we went through all of the downloads for .NET on the Microsoft Download Center and removed the little promotion things that say, hey, the Bing bar wants to come along for the ride. Or, hey,
really? Okay.
So we went through everything and removed them all so that if anyone sees any .NET developer tools advertising a sidecar, let me know and we'll get it removed.
Cool, perfect.
Okay, cool.
All right. Someone asking about the benchmarks.
Shrikant wants to know, we talked about ASP.NET benchmarks, and he wants to run it himself.
So they're asking basically if you want detailed setup instructions. Yeah, we don't have detailed setup instructions. Basically, it's just an app which is called Benchmarks, which has a couple of endpoints in it, and then you need to point a load generator at it. We use Work, W-R-K, which runs on Linux, because that's what everyone else in the world seems to use. So I could add some instructions, but frankly, even the Tech and Power benchmarks don't have instructions. They just assume that you can build Work and use it by Googling for how to use Work, which is what I did to figure out how to learn to use it. But that's all you need to do. You need to have a Linux machine. You could use a different tool to generate load if you want to. You can use WCAT, but that's even harder to use. You could use Apache Bench, but Apache Bench doesn't support a bunch of the features that Work does, so you might get different results. But yeah, basically it's just a website, you run it, and then you hit it with whatever load tool that you like, but we use Work.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
And someone just congratulating us on the site, which is nice.
It's funny though, like, it still took a couple of days, you know what I mean? Like, programming still takes time, with all the things that we have available to us to make life easier.
Yeah.
It's just all the little things, you know what I mean?
And
Like,
it was the little things. I had the major part of the site functional in a day, and I logged issues as I went, so I could keep track of things I knew I had to do. But a lot of it was just me figuring out what to do next.
yep.
You know, like a lot of it is like, I know I have to do a bunch of stuff. What
Right.
should I do first, and what makes sense to do next, and what makes sense to do next? What can I fudge around now before I go back and fix later? And a lot of it was just kind of that getting my things in order. I need to wave my hands around more, otherwise the thumbnails won't have my hands in it.
Yeah.
And so once I kind of got into that minimal sort of viable thing working, then it was just fixing stuff, tweak this, tweak that, or optimize that. I don't need that JavaScript file. Or I'm getting an error in IE that I'm not getting in Chrome. Look at the console.
Right.
Is gzip being used properly? Like all those little tiny things that, you know, that you just have to do as a web developer.
Tightening the screws. And Nick Craver, who is super fun, first thing he shows up, he sees this glorious, wonderful site that you've built, and he's like, the PNG for the Microsoft logo sucks because it's low res.
Yep.
So I'm like, oh, wow, okay, but you see all this great stuff that Damien, oh, this logo sucks. So I'm like, oh, fine, whatever. I'll get a SVG, right? So here we are zooming in. You see how lovely and whatever. But then it looks like crap on IE11, right?
Yeah.
So then I'm down the rabbit hole trying to figure out what the heck's going wrong. The one thing that you think you can count on is an SVG, so I end up having to hack around it like this with fallback. And it's like, gosh, you can't even just drop an SVG on a page.
No.
And have it just work.
I was looking at that this morning before I realized you'd fixed it. And there's actually a couple ways you can fix it. One is the SVG file itself has a width and height embedded in it, which is why IE shows it at that height. It doesn't honor the width and height on the image tag. And so you can remove those, and then IE will show it correctly. Or you can use CSS to target, use a media query that only works on IE, which is pretty easy to do. And then you can manually set the width of the image tag that uses SVG using an attribute selector.
If you add a view box in the SVG.
Right, and then you can set it via CSS. So you wouldn't, technically you could have got around it without having to change the markup, but what we have works now, so that's fine. Right,
and then you can also put it at 100%.
Yes. And
then put it into a table or something.
Well, yeah, you would definitely. I wouldn't have done, but yes. So the other one was the ICO file was the other one. So when I first got that ICO file, the ICO file was 14 kilobytes.
Oh,
and so it stuck out, and I'm like, oh my god! So I downloaded ICOFX, which I haven't run in like 7 years. I fired it up and found that it had like 18 different icon sizes inside the file, and I'm like, well, obviously I don't need those. So I deleted all but 2. I kept the 16 pixel and the 24 pixel because I'm a noob apparently at high DPI icons, and what I should have kept was the 16 and the 32 pixel. So I've now fixed that. Oh, look, you actually have a blog post on that.
So I love that you said that. So in 2007, these many years ago, 8 years ago, I used 230 gigs of bandwidth in a month. So I'm like, what the heck is going on? That's because my favorite icon was 70K. So I opened up an icon editor and I thought about it. I made 3 resolutions. I lowered the colors. I went from 70K to 4K.
Yeah.
And ultimately what this tells me is open up your freaking F12 tools.
Yep.
And know what gets delivered on first load and on second load. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I sat there with Control F5 going like this in Chrome and IE to just really make sure I knew what bytes were coming down. And I'm happy to say that the site is lean enough that actually a large portion of the payload comes from things like the analytics scripts, not from our content, which is good. And the only stuff that's actually served from our site itself is the fav icon, the HTML, and the background image. Like everything else, and obviously the CSS file, everything else is coming from a CDN or from YouTube, or so it's actually, and I think the whole site on the home page is under 500 kilobytes for all the content if you do a fresh load. So.
In conclusion, can you do me a favor and show that beta 6 download page again, and let's maybe get a blog post up on that as well.
If it's not up now, it will be going up very shortly.
Excellent. I want to just know what people need to Google with Bing for to find out what that is, because I wouldn't even know what to search for.
Let me have a look.
There you go. That makes sense. ASP.NET and Web Tools, Beta 6.
Is it up?
Oh, you're checking to see if we blogged it already?
I'm going to see if the blog post is up yet. Yep, there it is.
Oh, you're magical.
There it is.
Go ahead and do that. Oh, you did.
Thank you, Jeff.
That's nice.
Yep, so that's all there. And there's a whole bunch of stuff about what's changed, a bunch of stuff, packages, new tooling, and you can download the tooling from here.
Brilliant, brilliant. So this was our best episode ever.
Thank you. We had people watching for the first time. The site worked.
It did, with the power and the scale of YouTube. Oh, did we ask about caching? Like, are you caching stuff?
Yeah, I did mention I'm caching the result from the YouTube API for a day, and then the admin screen has a big red button that says clear YouTube cache for when we update the playlist, like we'll do in the next 5 minutes.
Right. Cool. Well, hopefully we'll get that code out, because I think that even though it's a trivial site, it's a useful one that people will look at every day.
Yeah, I think so too. So I'll work on that.
Oh, hey. So how will it know when next week's is? Do you do that now? Maybe you should do that.
I will do that now. I'll go into the admin screen and I will put in the date and time of next week's.
Okay, cool. All right. Get ready for the dramatic zoom out.
I am ready, sir.
All right. Engage. Bum, 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 bum.